Aloha. It is my pleasure to welcome to the floor Dr. Wan. Dr. Wan is the director of the Wildlife Rehabilitation um, and Veterinary Medicine at the Hawaii Wildlife Center, located here on Hawaii Island. He earned his bachelor's in animal science and his doctorate in veterinarian medicine from Cornell University. He's been actively engaged in the work of the Hawaii Wildlife Center for close to 10 years. And Dr. Wan graciously took on his first ever TCBS intern just this fall. And so, Dr. Wan, I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for having us here, and we're really happy to have David do his internship with us. It's been great to have him the last couple of months. David J. Arakawa is from the island of Oahu. He has always been interested in nature and in conservation, especially birds, and he hoped to be a part of those that care for nature as well. He received his Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and he's currently a Master of Science student in the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Science program at University of Hawaii at Hilo. He did his internship with us for his master's, and he is aspiring to go into state or federal conservation work and hopefully continue working with birds. So thank you, David, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Juan. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay. So, aloha, I am David Arakawa, and I will be talking about my experience interning with the Hawaii Wildlife Center, saving our native seabirds. And my mentor is Dr. Juan Guerrero, and Lisa Canale is my internship advisor. So I wanted to start with a bit more about myself. I first started off my TCBS program journey on the thesis track, and this was doing sound ecology research with Dr. Patrick Hart in his lab. But due to a few reasons, I ended up having to swap over to the internship track. But I knew one thing while making that switch was I really wanted to keep doing work involving birds. And you might be wondering why it had to be birds, and it's because they're my favorite animals, but I couldn't tell you exactly why they are. As a kid, I spent a lot of time liking a lot of different animals. Could be dinosaurs at one time, and then it's sharks at another. And somehow I landed up on birds, and it kind of just stuck. But unfortunately, growing up, I never really had any experience handling birds, whether it was in a personal or professional setting. And so I really looked forward to my internship with the Hawaii Wildlife Center, where I would get that type of experience. The Hawaii Wildlife Center is a 501c nonprofit organization that services all major and minor Hawaiian islands. Their mission is to protect, conserve, and aid in the recovery of Hawaii's native winged wildlife through hands-on treatment, research, training, science education, and cultural programs. This includes not only the native birds, but also our native Hawaiian hoary bat. The center is located in Kapa'au on the island of Hawaii. The center is both the base of operations, but also the wildlife hospital where they rehabilitate any native winged wildlife that can be saved and returned to the wild. Wildlife rehabilitation is defined as the treatment or care of sick, injured, or orphaned wild animals and their preparation for release to a successful life back in the wild, as defined by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Here in these pictures, on the bottom left, we have a picture of some bullrose petrels swimming on the pool to help them with their waterproofing process. In the center, we have a Hawaiian petrel or wa'u right after we gave it a health examination when it came into the center. And on the right, we have two bins with some young terns in them, and one of them has their cover off, so you can kind of see him sitting there. I was really lucky being able to actually go to the center and receive training in person, which has proven to be very difficult during this pandemic. While I was there, I spent a lot of time with food prep at the station pictured in the bottom left. But otherwise, I was also learning a lot of different rehabilitation techniques, such as how to handle birds, how to safely pick them up, weigh them, examine them, feed them. And here we have in the center a picture of some smelt that we're getting ready to be fed over to the white terns. And in the bottom right, we have a picture of a nene salad that's composed of some leafy greens, a few various frozen fruits. Maybe we'll put in some frozen peas, frozen corn, maybe something. Kind of will just depend on what's available. And here are a few other pictures from my time there. Towards the ending of my training, we had a large influx of bulrus petrels, which are denoted by the acronym BUPE. And so that top right picture is denoted as Boop City. On the left, we have a picture of when I went with my mentor Juan and Ray, the development coordinator, to drop off a pueo to be released on Kauai to Bill Mellon, a pilot with the US Coast Guard Auxiliary, as well as to pick up another bird, which I believe was the Hawaiian petrel that was pictured earlier. My internship focused on two specific birds, species of birds. First off, we have the white tern, also known as the manuoku. They are found widespread in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, but within the main Hawaiian Islands, they're only found on the island of Oahu. They were also named as the official bird of the city and county of Honolulu. These birds are really interesting in the fact that they will lay their egg on just a branch or other flat surface high up, unlike most birds where they make a nest. The second species of bird is the wedge-tailed shearwater, also known as uaukani. These birds are widespread throughout the Hawaiian Islands, and shearwaters will actually spend most of the year out at sea, but only return to land for breeding. And to do so, they will make a nest. They will nest in a burrow, which they can dig out themselves, or they might reuse an old one if it's available. And perhaps maybe they'll use even a man-made burrow that they have a liking to. And in the right picture, we can see is about just how big they can get. And also you can see a little bit of fluff on him. He's got a little bit of a mohawk going. But these young shearwaters, also known as fledglings, will leave their burrows at night for their first flight and be guided to the sea by moonlight, where they'll stay out at sea for the next 2 to 3 years before coming back to breed. As they're guided by moonlight, artificial light is a big problem. And these fledglings, when they leave their burrows at night, may become misguided or disoriented by these artificial lights due to them being brighter than moonlight. And so they can end up flying around in circles, trying to figure out where they are, trying to go, and end up exhausting themselves and just falling out of the sky, landing on the ground. And now on the ground, they are in danger from, if they've landed in a parking lot or road, they could get run over by a car perhaps, or they're also now very susceptible to predation. And so these predators are going to be rats, mongoose, cats, and maybe even a barn owl if they're in the area. And I just want to point out very quickly, the cat picture in the bottom left is actually carrying a dead Hawaiian coot. And also by the picture taker, it was noted that this cat had a notched ear, denoting it's from a managed colony. One of the main components of my internship was with the Oahu Seabird Aid Program, which is a program under the Hawaii Wildlife Center done in conjunction with a few other organizations, primarily with Feather and Fur Animal Hospital in Kailua, where they open up space in their clinic for invasive operations for us to go in and help save wedge-tailed shearwaters during the fallout season from November to December, which is shown in the left picture. And each one of those blue containers actually contains one wedge-tailed shearwater in each of them. During this time, I worked very closely with Alexis Wessels, who is the program manager. And while I was working, we would start the day with a thorough examination of any birds that came in the previous night to that morning and determine if they would be going out for a hard release or soft release. Or maybe they have other problems or they need to take a little bit more time. But during this program, we had 525 shearwaters come in. I'll now explain a little bit about what those release terms mean. So a hard release is pictured here on the left, where we will just take them out to a beach and have them rest on our hand for them to kind of go on their own. But if we think that they need to go to soft release, it may be because they might have a little bit too much fluff on them still, or maybe we took them to hard release, but they're just a little bit too shy to go right there. So we'll take them over to the Freeman Seabird Preserve, where we will place them into one of the burrows there so that they can leave whenever they want. The next major component of my internship was with the Manuoku Soft Release Program. This program is done in conjunction with the Honolulu Zoo. White terns that have been orphaned and cannot be reunited with their parents will be sent over to the Wildlife Center to fledge. Once they're fledged, they will be sent back over to Oahu to the Honolulu Zoo, where they'll be kept a few days in a soft release cage and then released. As white terns are known to get supplemental feeding from their parents in the wild, someone needs to do this for these orphan terns coming through the program. And this task is taken up by the staff and volunteers at the Honolulu Zoo. And so I was one of those volunteers. And on the left, we have a picture of what we used to feed them. It is a smelt at the end of a bamboo stick, a very long bamboo stick, as you can see in the right picture. But during most of my time during this project, I was actually sitting behind my computer, transposing written documents of observations of these terns through the program into a Google Sheet, which could get difficult at times if we don't know which bird is which. And that right picture is a very close-up picture of a white tern. Well, they're band mostly. To show just kind of how hard it can be to see these band numbers and who's who. As well as right here, on the right, we have a physical copy of one of the tern papers. And I now know how hard it can be to read people's handwritings. I myself have very bad handwriting myself as well. And then we move them over to the left side, which is the Google Sheet that I was inputting everything into. So we use this data for a data analysis to look at how long these birds were coming back. And so this graph here shows just that. The birds that only have one in their duration, these were birds that basically released and just never came back. Whereas anything else were how long they came, the difference between when they were released and the last time that they were seen. So we know that at least one of these birds has survived for at the very least 44 days. And on average, we have, or not average, but in the median is 5. So we know it's about five days that they might continue coming back. The other things that we looked at were the number of birds per feeding. So we wanted to see just how many birds were coming per feeding, or at the least how many were coming. And so the medians that we found, or that I found, were 1 if we're looking only at specific birds that we know who they are. And we have a median of 2 if we include all birds that are known as well as any unknown birds. And so this means we have at least 1 bird per feeding. But during my time, I noticed that I would do a few mornings, noons, and then a lot of evening feedings. And I kind of noticed there was a discrepancy in the number of birds coming within each feeding. And so I wanted to see what was the most popular feeding time. And so in this little table here, we can see that we have a median of 4 birds for the morning feedings with a total of 958, which is actually at the least of 958, as within the data, we would sometimes see things such as an unspecified group, which would mean I saw a group of terns, but we don't know how many terns they're talking about. So we denoted this as only 2 terns. And so we can see mornings were definitely their favorite times and evenings were their least favorite, which makes me a little sad. I didn't get to see as many turns while feeding. But throughout my internship on Oahu, I would get asked questions at times, such as in the zoo, if you're carrying around this very long bamboo pole, people ask you questions. And so a few of the interactions I had were with parents with their kids. And so I would give them a brief explanation about what white terns are, what the soft release program does, as well as also talking about the Hawaii Wildlife Center. But during the Oahu Seabird Aid program, we'd be driving around in the Hawaii Wildlife Center van shown there with one of our volunteers, Christine Loney. And when we park, we're grabbing all of these blue containers out and people walking by will ask, oh, what are you guys doing? And so we'll answer questions, we'll tell them a little bit about the wedge-tailed shearwaters and what fallout season is, what they can do to help with rescuing these birds. And we also did have a release with a family where the dad of that family, he had helped with the renovations of a trailer that we use at the Honolulu Zoo. And so we went out, he brought his family out and they helped us with a release. But otherwise for outreach, I was also making 2 outreach materials that would be used at a later date. The first one is here focusing on artificial light and what people can do to reduce light pollution. The second one was on specifically seabird fallout season and what people can do to help save our wedge-tailed shearwaters during that time. But in conclusion, I've learned a lot about wildlife rehabilitation and the proper handling of wild birds. And in the process, I've also gained more experience in data management and data analysis. And moving forward, I do hope that I'll be able to get a job in either state or federal work and hopefully still work with birds. But I definitely know I'll still be in the conservation field otherwise. And I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Juan, my mentor, and Alexis Wessos, who taught me a lot during my time, as well as the rest of the Hawaii Wildlife Center staff. I also want to give a thank you to Dr. Walsh and all of the staff and volunteers at Feather and Fur for all their help provided during the fallout season. Thank you to Shelby Carlos and Lara Debnar, who are my main contacts at the zoo. So I want to thank Patrick Hart and Christina Paxton for all their help and guidance during my time in the thesis track. Thank you to Lisa for all of your help in my move to the internship track and your support with getting all of this done. I also want to thank all my TCBES graduate students for all of their support as well in getting all of this done for all of us, really. And last but not least, I also want to thank my mother who supported me throughout all of my schooling and the various ups and downs of making this move. This is some of the literature I cited, and here's my contact information if you have any questions. Thank you. Oh, Lisa, I can't hear you.
Shoots, I am so sorry. I have 2 mics here. And anyway, I was saying thank you so much for your presentation and how we appreciate the good work that you did on Oahu. And I was saying also that I think a few of us might be a little bit envious that you were able to touch those balls of fluff because they're so adorable. And I hope that the communication pamphlets that you created are put into good use in the future. I'd like to open up the floor for questions. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it.
Hey, hey, this is Pat. David, I just wanted to say great job on that. It's really impressed with your work. It looks like you had a really great and fulfilling and important internship. And yeah, thank you, Juan. Good job mentoring David. It looks like a really great project. I'm jealous. I would love to do something like that myself. But anyways, yeah, just real quick, and this is just how do you guys work the transport? Like, because this facility's in Kohala, yeah? And then is it Hawaiian Airlines that does this, or how does those arrangements usually happen? Or is it helicopter?
Oh, Juan, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much you know about the transport, David.
Not a lot.
Yeah, David helped us with there was the picture where the pilot Bill Mellon transported a bird for us. So that's the Coast Guard. So when they're available, we like to use them, and especially if we have an endangered bird where we want to minimize the amount of time of transport, we love to use them, and they're a great help. Otherwise, for most of the transports, it's going to be commercial airlines. So Hawaiian Airlines has been the one that's been helping us. They don't usually do birds, but because these are native Hawaiian birds, we've been able to work with them to get these birds to us. And yeah, we have a facility here with centralized care as far as aviaries. There's more land here available than in Oahu. So as far as the birds go, yeah, like David said, Feather and Fur is our partner in Oahu, and that's the drop-off and stabilization site. They're in communication with us, and when a bird is stable for transport, we have a group of volunteers that help get those birds to the airport. Hawaiian Airlines helps get those birds safely to us here on the Big Island, and then again, here we have volunteers that bring us the birds to the facility.
And then for birds like ua'u or ua'ukani, where they can fly, if they're from, say, Oahu or Kauai and they're brought to the Big Island, do you release them on the Big Island, or do you take them back to where they came from? And does that vary by species?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you had any experience, David, with some of those birds.
I only know that, like, for ones that they have very widespread ranges, that we'll just release them from the island. We don't have to necessarily take them back to the exact island.
Like the wedge-tail shearwaters, for example, and the ua'u. Yeah.
Yeah. So those ones will, like you mentioned, the ones that travel long distances, we can just release them here on the Big Island, and then. Definitely the land species, if we get pueo from Oahu, they're going to go back to Oahu. Sometimes boobies, it will fly those back. But yeah, petrels and shearwaters, we can release them here.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Great job again, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess since I have my mic on, thank you so much, David, for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed having you as an intern, and it's a very nice thing that we did with you, in that our regular internship is just a couple of weeks long, but we were able to interact with you for several months, and you helped us across multiple projects. I just got to see David in December as we're working to set up a satellite clinic in Honolulu at the Honolulu Zoo. Just to kind of help the overall response in Oahu and help the birds on that island. So it was great having David to help us in everything. And also your Manoaku data analysis. It's been really helpful, and I was very interested to see your results on the feeding schedule, because that kind of can help us guide what is the most important feeding times in case we are short-staffed. Then as we open up the facility in Oahu, what are the most important times to feed the white terns? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Is there any other questions? I'd like to open up the floor. Okay. Well, David, I'm going to ask you a really simple question, and that is, out of the bird species that you have interacted with or know of, do you have one particular favorite, or do you not like to play favorites?
I don't really like to play favorites, but I think both species, the white terns and the wedge-tailed shearwaters, really grew on me during this internship. During my training, I didn't like wedge-tailed shearwaters too much because when we have to feed them, it really hurts because their beaks are really strong. But during when I was doing fallout season, they really grew on me. They were still really nice, still hurt, but still very fun. And yeah.
Okay. And then for us in the audience, like what kind of tips do you have for us to help with the seabird population to help you know, with conservation work? What would you recommend?
Well, I would say if we're talking about like for light pollution stuff, some of the things that I would recommend are going to be like changing LEDs into like a warmer, dimmer color lights. You can also just choose dimmer lighting in general. You can also another thing that can be really helpful is putting like a shield on it so that it's more directional and so you don't have as much like just a glow. Otherwise, contact the Hawaii Wildlife Center. They're very good at this.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, David, for your presentation. If anybody has any questions that come up later, please contact David directly, or you can send them to me and I will send them to David. Thank you very much, Dr. Wan, for being here today too. We will take a break now and return at 1:30 for our next graduate student presentation. So I will see you all in about 18 minutes. All right.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan.